Hello there, and welcome to another scintillating episode of your favorite comics-themed web show, whatever the hell this is, Prolix Comics Bollocks. That is myself, one of the hosts, Nick, and himself, another of our hosts.
Another one of the hosts, Clive.
All right. So,
what's on the end of your stick, Nick?
A zit. In fact, the first one I've had, I feel like since I was about, I don't know if it's showing up well, but always fascinating.
Yeah, no one would have noticed, but you're doing a good job of drawing attention to it.
When you're always fascinating when you're 47 and you're like, oh, I thought that stuff was done.
Hang on,
when I was 17.
Let me show you my piles.
Oh, excellent! Please, little stinky balloons. I heard somebody once refer to them as. So we're talking a couple of things today. In fact, we are talking primarily, we're here to talk about this book, which is a graphic novel by Darwin Cooke, but based on, or an adaptation of a novel by Richard Stark, who is in fact another guy entirely called Donald Westlake. And we'll unpack all of that in a couple of moments. But I think there's no way of talking about this without at least briefly talking about this, which is the novel that it's based upon. And unfortunately, thanks to Clive, I have recently also seen the movie adaptation. As you said, Clive emailed me to say that it was too bad that the people who involved in the production of the movie SLAYGROUND couldn't afford a copy of this novel to give to the screenwriter, because evidently
them yours.
Yeah. He must have gotten all of his notes from like one of those little square stickies where they wrote down 4 names and said.
Yeah, it is a bit of a hash job. I mean, well, let's talk about the book first then.
Yes. Okay.
So this is towards so the Donald E. Westlake
is our author,
and he. Well, so this is, I feel as if I'm not well read enough to say this for sure, but of the other things that I have read, so he wrote this series of books under the name Richard Stark, right? The Parker series, Parker being a career criminal, a very hard-boiled, stripped-down series.
Yeah.
And then he wrote all these other books as well, like the Dortmunder books and these comical crime books, which do nothing for me at all, I have to admit. And they have their fans as well, but they leave me. They don't work as crime novels. They're not funny. I know there's other ones as well, like, and I like some of the film adaptations of it, like the Hot Rock. It's a good movie, and that's based. I don't think that's a Dortmunder one. Is it the Hot Rock?
I don't actually remember. Yeah.
So
I have read very few books by Donald E. Westlake.
Yes, me too.
But I've read a hell of a lot, or virtually everything that Richard Stark has written.
Right. So I'm wondering if there's some one-off Westlake books that are worth.
I think so. I think there are. Yeah, and I have a couple here that are like old paperbacks I bought when I was living in Japan. And every now and again you'll get one and you're like, oh, this is not this is a Stark book, but this is before he's created the name. But some of them are grittier and grimmer for sure.
Because it strikes me as unlikely that he would have only, saved this flavor for the Parker books because he's so good at it. Like the Richard Stark Parker books are pretty great, right? I mean, So here's another one where critical distance be damned. There's not going to be any when it comes to talking about the Parker books. Generally, for me, there's one or two of them that are slightly weaker than the others, but really the vast majority of them are amazing, and there's a lot of them. So of the original run, because he stopped and then came back for a while.
Yeah.
This is towards the end, right? This is like, is it the penultimate one?
SLAYGROUND is I think the third from last.
Okay, and then he took a break, and then he brought the character back again in like the late 90s or something like that. Yeah.
Which are all, I mean, I haven't actually read every single one of them, but they're surprisingly good. to be honest, for
Okay.
something that somebody coming back to something after so long and having not done Stark and written in the voice for a long, long time. They are actually they're good. The only strange thing is he updates all of the world that Stark lives in to kind of match our world now. So suddenly there's cell phones and things, and you're just like, well, hang on, how long is Parker supposed to have lived?
Yeah, how old is he now? Is he an old dude in the new books, or?
Well, no.
Okay.
It creates this kind of weird disconnect. So anyway, so yeah.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, no, just for my own satisfaction here as well, and we won't say what it is because don't want to give spoilers. But so the unresolved issue at the end of SLAYGROUND, Nick, does that does that ever come back in any of the later?
Oh yes, in fact,
okay.
The last book. If you haven't read the last book of the original run, which is called Butcher's Moon.
Yeah, I haven't read that one.
Then you need to read Butcher's Moon, because one of the things when you go back and reread them in order from 1 to whatever it is, 16, or I can't remember, how many there are in the original run, you realize we've talked about this before with other things, like when you go back and watch, for example, all the Zatoichi movies in order from the beginning, you suddenly realize, hang on, I missed all of these connections between,
right,
and that's even more the case. Although they all seem like standalones and they all work very well as standalones, and most of us who read them the first time around had to read them as standalones because you found them very infrequently in secondhand bookshops.
Right.
The old Avon paperback versions, or if you're lucky, you found older ones. You just didn't get to. And then when I went back just a couple of years ago and I did read them all from The Hunter right the way through, I was like, oh my God, there's kind of a story that's being told here. And most of the loose ends, if not all of the loose ends, are tied up in that last book.
Oh, interesting.
Butcher's Moon brings back a lot of characters from previous books, and brings back a lot of unresolved. There are other little unresolved bits. Parker usually ties up all the loose ends by putting a bullet through people's faces, but that's one of the rare. SLAYGROUND is one of the rare cases where it's not. But then, for one thing, there's money. Right. Which is
I was wondering about that actually. Good. Because I think I don't think there's any gaps. I think I've read everything up until, because I hadn't read SLAYGROUND until I read it for this. I think I read all the way up to SLAYGROUND.
Okay.
I stalled there for a little bit. Okay. Because I think, like you said, I feel as if maybe I can't remember exactly, but maybe the 2 or 3 just before SLAYGROUND might have been among those ones you were saying that didn't quite live up to the. There's a slight dip in quality, and then SLAYGROUND
plateau maybe.
Yeah, and then SLAYGROUND just kind of brings it right back, because SLAYGROUND, what I like, SLAYGROUND just has a really nice, simple, central premise, right? Which is basically someone being laid siege to in an amusement park. That's the main thing, right? Which is a great idea.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And so what's interesting is, so I read the graphic novel adaptation of it for the show, and then just earlier today I was like, I should sit down and I should just take a look at the book. And I read the first 100 pages of it.
Yeah.
In so quickly, and I was like, I forget. It's been a while since I've actually picked up a Richard Stark book. But I remember, and one of the ways in which I probably first heard the name Richard Stark, and you may have as well, I don't know, but many people did of my age, was in The Dark Half by Stephen King.
Right. Yes.
In The Dark Half, either in the frontispiece or the back end of the book, where he talks about the writing of the book, he talks explicitly about how the main character in The Dark Half is based on Donald Westlake / Richard Stark. And I think he's even called Stark.
Yes, he is. He is in the film as well, I think.
Yeah. And in that piece, I'm pretty sure it's King who says, Richard Stark books are machines that read themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, I had that experience again where I sat down and I was like, what? Like, holy shit. It's just like, you're just ripping through this in a way that it's almost nobody who's as readable. If I could give these to struggling readers, like, I think everyone who's 13 years old who doesn't like reading should be given The only problem is you'd get fired because of some of what's in them, right?
Marky Smith said a similar thing once about like, yeah, when he was in school, like, you know, maybe not really getting into whatever the teachers assigned you, but, you know, George V. Higgins, The Friends of Eddie Coyle, yep, snap that up, you know, and those as well. And I think there might be a bit of a, I think there might be a bit of a influence there as well. Similarly, yeah, the Higgins stuff, because the Higgins stuff is different though, because the best Higgins books are mostly just pure dialogue as well, right? So you're not even reading a story; it's just you're just reading reams and reams of dialogue, and it snaps. But yeah, I went to the bath with SLAYGROUND, and came out 3 hours later. You know, the wife came to check on me a few times. Oh, did you drown?
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was still there, and yeah, I ripped through it in one sitting pretty much, and no, it was good. It was nice because like I said, I think because of those two, or maybe I got slightly burnt out on reading too many too close to together or something.
Yeah.
But no, this is a great one. It's not. It's. I don't think it's up there with like the top 3. It's not quite.
No, but it's top 5.
Yeah, it's good.
Top 6.
It's fun. Yeah.
A lot of people do when they do their short list of their 5 favorite Parker books. This one often tends to end up in there. I think.
I think it's just because
it is quite different in some ways.
Yeah, but it's got that clever hook. It's one of those things that you can imagine Donald E. Westlake just kind of having amusement park.
Yeah, and you almost feel like he must have taken a visit to Disneyland and just traveled around being like, you could kill somebody with that. I think you could kill somebody with that. Like just, you know, making a list of
The only ride that strikes me as, and I don't know, slightly, I mean, nowadays at least, I don't know, is there's like a ride, a submarine ride.
Yeah.
That strikes me as slightly something you wouldn't find now anyway, certainly. But then, but back in the 70s, maybe. There was great. I think somebody's making a documentary about this famously dangerous theme park in the US. Yes.
That was like,
yes. There was Johnny Knoxville made a fictional film kind of based on it as well, right?
Yeah. But everything I've read about that place is hilarious and horrifying.
You only need to watch Santa and the Ice Cream Bunny, right? And there's those scenes of the kids riding those.
And that's the one.
Horse thing.
That's the one. Yeah. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So I maybe one of this is not connected at all, but I'm fascinated. I was just reading, going through Donald E. Westlake's thing because he has like a dozen other pseudonyms, right? Like a lot of these people where he's written tons of books under these different names. Some of them were for like nonfiction books, some of them. But he had Alan Marshall or Anna Marsh. Westlake acknowledged to writing as many as 28 paperback soft porn titles from 59 to 64, including books like All My Lovers, Man Hungry, All About Annette, Sally, Virgin Summer, Call Me Sinner, Off Limits, Sin Prowl. I'd be interested to know what Alan Marsh is like, given what I know Richard Stark to be like in terms of the hard-boiled crime. We know Westlake is our soft-boiled crime, I guess. It's funny. I should say this is probably heresy to some of my friends who are big Elmore Leonard fans, but I never cottoned to Elmore Leonard for the same reason I never really cottoned to what's his face here, Westlake.
I have time for Elmore Leonard. I've read some Elmore Leonard books that I like, but again, they feel definitely very much influenced by George V. Higgins, for example.
Well, because they are super dialogue heavy, right? They're scripted. Yeah. But I think the humor. When it comes to crime, I kind of like it to be very tense, very on edge, and that's what Donald Westlake can do when he's writing as Richard Stark.
Right.
It's wound so tight, right? And there's no fat in those stories. There's just, and SLAYGROUND is a great example, I think, because it's one of the leanest of a bunch of lean books, right?
Yes.
As you said, it's really got one idea Parker, our career criminal, ends up having to defend himself in a fortified, self-fortified amusement park. And I mean, it often, a lot of reviews bring up Die Hard, you know, and say, and wonder, I guess, whether or not, although Die Hard itself is based on a novel sequel to The Detective, was supposed to star Frank Sinatra originally. But it does have some of the same kinds of stuff, and you know, in it. And the other thing that springs to mind, weirdly enough, is like First Blood as well. This idea of like the setting of series of traps, you know, like of having to go out there by yourself, and like, I don't know, it was maybe something in the air at the time, in that kind of 70s.
But it's yeah, no, like you said, it is a good example of something that more or less reads itself. And so yes, so unfortunately, in between,
I think you made the mistake of reading them in the wrong order. I deliberately didn't read the novel first, although I've read it before. But I read the graphic novel. Look, this time around, I decided I'm going to read the graphic novel on its own terms and enjoy it. And then, if I'm inspired to go back and read the novel, I'll do that. But I think the only experience of doing it the other way would be to be disappointed, to read them back to back, close together. I think. Yes. Although I think that Darwin Cooke's adaptations, generally speaking, of these books are really good, for reasons I'll get into in a moment. But it's not the same. It's not.
No, I agree with you. In retrospect, I think I would, yes, if I were to approach another one of the Darwin Cooke ones, I wouldn't read the novel just
directly before. Yeah.
Anything's
going to suffer from comparison, and certainly don't watch the movie with Peter Coyote.
Oh, that's fine, because it's got fuck all to do with anything. So.
True enough.
I mean, that what a like, I'm still baffled as to, because it's not as if, like, I can understand that you have a very complex novel with lots of moving parts and you decide to strip it down to make it simpler to film. But this film, they went the other way. Like, they had a great premise. Turned it into this weird Atlantic crossing fucking
giallo sort of.
Yeah, like, it's a bit horror inflected. I mean, it's not awful. It's not a good film, but it's definitely a terrible Parker.
Yes.
He's not even called Parker. He's called Stone.
But that's famously Richard Stark or Donald Westlake refused to allow anyone to use the name unless they were willing to sign on to make a series of films.
Right, and so he's not a very good. I think I like Peter Coyote in general, but he's very miscast here, and I don't see Parker, you know, running out to rescue a small child from a car wreck. You know, my Parker kind of just shrugs and doesn't.
Right? No question that whole thing is ridiculous. In terms of if you know who this is supposed to be. Yes.
Plus, I mean, and then you're like, oh, we need to get, because obviously it's a British film, so you know you need a certain amount, you need a certain quota of, you know, who are we going to get for our hardened villain turned, you know, what should we get? Should we get a aging Michael Caine? Is Ray Winston? Who should we get? Oh, Mel Smith. I mean, for fuck's sake. I mean, Mel Smith. Even Griff Rhys-Jones would have been about as convincing as Mel Smith.
Yes. Although the funny thing is, I wonder if that was just because he was already, so the same company that made this made 4 movies around the same time, and one of the other movies was Morons from Outer Space.
Yeah, God. I suppose in SLAYGROUND's favor, it at least isn't Morons from Outer Space.
Morons from Outer Space.
It's fucking. Recently, a podcast that I listened to did an episode about morons from outer space.
Okay.
And
I forgot Jimmy Nail is in that until I was reading
it
about it because
seems
I was
like
thinking of
this,
Playground.
it now has a cult. I can't believe this. And these people were talking about how hilarious and underrated morons out of space. And I was like, no, it's shit.
No,
it's always been
awful.
shit. It's terrible.
Wow. Oh yeah, no. Okay. So that's what I'm wondering if Mel Smith was just on their radar because he was already doing that with them at the same time, and they were like, "Oh, we have this other thing going on," and we couldn't get Ray Winstone.
The other film that lot made, which intrigues me, which I've never seen, is there's one, I think it's called Dream Child, which I think is a film about Lewis Carroll's obsession with the little girl who inspired Alice.
Okay.
Which could be potentially interesting depending on
I think I have seen that. Is that the one that has Ian Holm in it?
Yes.
Yes, I've seen that. And the reason I saw it was I grabbed it for Jen because she's a big Henson fan, and it's there's something like it's got a lot of weird puppetry and stuff in it that's very of that era. And and it's weird. It's weird.
Okay.
Very weird.
I'm intrigued now.
But anyway, that's got nothing to do with Parker.
No, but while we're on the subject, so let's talk about this as well, because it's quite interesting. So let's talk cinematic Parker then, seeing as we're here. Because
we're never going to talk about this. This is on Prolix Comics Bollocks. We're not going to talk about the comic.
The comic, no.
Maybe we'll save 5 minutes at the end.
We'll even talk about the Parker lunchbox before we get to the...
Okay, all right. So, yes, the other way I think a lot of people come to Parker, if they're not like 70-year-old men who bought the paperback in a grubby, gas station somewhere in 1960-something, a lot of people came through the various movie adaptations that have been made over the years. Right. Starting with,
Point Blank,
maybe the best of all of them, right?
Well, this is interesting to me. So I think this is definitely the best film based on a Parker book.
Yeah, the best movie, but it's not the best adaptation.
It's not exactly faithful.
No, it uses the book as a jumping off point to do some of its own things, but those things are all great. And
as much as I love Lee Marvin as well, I have to say kind of the opposite of that is it's not a good film, Payback.
Yes.
But I think Mel Gibson is a great Parker. Like when I read Parker books, I see Mel Gibson in his leather jacket. I mean,
okay, that's interesting.
I really think he's a good. I mean, I haven't seen Payback for a while, so I might be remembering it wrong, but at least potentially, I can't remember how he plays it in the film. If he does it, if he. Well, there's two different. I mean, I'm sure there's two different versions of the film as well, right? Two quite different versions, and the one that was the director's cut is a lot closer. Yeah, I mean that's a Mel Gibson performance. It's a lot closer to the Parker of the books. It's a lot more lightened up, and there's a lot more jokiness and a lot more kind of. There's a tendency to do that, and it's funny actually. Bring it back to the comics just for a moment. When Darwin Cooke, the Canadian, who's passed away sadly a couple of years ago. Really?
Yeah.
I guess they're not getting any more then.
Of cancer, yeah. When he was adapting the first book, The Hunter, the one that was made into Point Blank, he said like he would watch these various movies and he'd always be like, oh, like they've always got to make Parker soft. They've always got to kind of blunt the edges just a bit because he's a bit too spiky a character, right? So either they give him a dog, or he saves a dog, or he's Peter Coyote. He goes back to save the little girl, or in every single version, with the possible exception of the outfit.
Well, that was my next thing.
We'll get there in a moment. Okay.
Yeah,
but
that's very faithful, I think, if memory serves.
Yes. So in almost every single version, they take the edges off of him. They make him less of a bastard. And Darwin Cooke was like, so I'm gonna do it right off the page. And he gets to this part where he's drawing the adaptation of the first book, and he's like, oh, I can't draw this. Like, I'm gonna have to cut this or do something else. Because there's a part in the original book where Parker comes back and his Lynn, who is his wife, who betrays him, he comes back and she ODs, and it's in Point Blank, and it's also in Payback. But what's not in either of those movies is what he does next. He doesn't want anyone to know who she is, so he cuts her face to pieces. He defaces her corpse and then dumps her in a park. And that's Richard Stark's Parker. That's the Parker that's like, I have a problem, and sentiment be damned, this woman was my wife, but like, I'm a problem solver, right? And so Darwin Cooke, he said he's never drawn anything like that in his life. He'd never, and he decided, well, I have to put the scene in, because if I don't put the scene in, then I'm doing exactly whatever. But he said he didn't feel any sympathy for everyone up until that moment. And he suddenly realized everyone who tries to adapt Parker has this moment of a crisis of like, can I actually adapt this character as written on the page to another form?
Right.
And really, like, he's so awful in a way.
Yeah. We mentioned the outfit. I think, the outfit is a film actually ripe for rewatch. I haven't seen it for a long time, but I remember being very impressed. In fact, I first saw it on late night television before I even knew anything about the Parker books, and I just liked it as a film.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah, it is.
It's an awesome
gritty
movie.
70s film, right?
Yeah, it's right with prime cut, and there's that brace of American 70s crime films that are just like so grim and so ugly. Like, that movie is the ugliest, like everything, everyone's wallpaper and like the crappy furniture in their homes. It's just ultra grim, and that's unsurprisingly maybe before he passed away, that was the one that Westlake himself said the only time he ever thought they did it right. He said, yeah, Duvall doesn't exactly look like Parker in my mind. He's bald and chubby and stuff like that. But he said, but the performance is exactly what he imagined, and like the movie itself, as he said, it was the best adaptation. Plus, it's got Timothy Carey in it.
Yes, Karen Black as well, isn't she? If I remember correctly. So definitely around 90. I think the only Parker film I haven't seen is the Goddard one, which I think isn't even really a Parker film, right?
No. Made in the USA, I think it's called.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I guess the one after, I mean, what else is there? Oh yeah, so there's Mise à Sac. There's the French one.
Yes, which is not bad, actually.
Intend to watch again. I've only seen, I think, maybe the first 20 minutes, but it seemed great, and I don't know why I didn't, at the time I got distracted or something.
Right.
And then you've got, but then like
there's the Jason Statham one in recent years.
Right, and that's the first one where the name is used, because they did in fact buy the rights to make a series of films, and it didn't, after the first one, didn't do very well.
Yeah,
it's based on one of the later books, and it's quite a lot of liberties are even taken with that book.
Again, I think the problem is with, I mean, I like Jason Statham a lot, but I think Jason Statham has been around long enough now and has a sort of, people like Jason Statham. He has a certain charm about him, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think he's probably a bit too charming to play Parker, right? He's got to be a proper mean son of a bitch, right? And I can't see, I mean, again, they'll give him a fucking parrot or a sidekick or something, and I don't hardly remember anything about that film. I don't even remember what the fuck was it called. Was it just called Parker, or was it?
Yes. Yeah.
But I don't remember it leaving a big impression on me, and I certainly don't think it was like mean and hard-boiled and tough.
No, it had a few. There's again, like all of them, they always have a moment or two. Oh, and we didn't mention the Jim Brown one.
Oh, The Split. I hardly remember anything about that.
Which is the greatest waste of one of the greatest casts of all time. Because like young, super gross Donald Sutherland is in it, like just being a sleazy guy. Ernest Borgnine is chewing up the scenery and like throwing himself around the room
is,
and stuff.
Is Gene Hackman Parker?
Gene Hackman is in it. No, he's not. No, Jim Brown.
Oh, Jim Brown is Parker. Oh, okay.
Yes. And Warren Oates is in it.
Yes, I haven't seen it for a while.
So it's unfortunately it's not.
I remember it being okay as
but it's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay. Again, it's not Parker, but it does enough of the Parker DNA in there, and then the actors are so good.
I suspect if they are going, and I know some things in development now, right, with Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
And I suspect the way to go with it is probably to cast a total unknown who becomes Parker. But I was wondering, because no one jumps to I can't actually think if you were to do fantasy casting for Parker. I can't, like I said,
I can, but it's not doable anymore because all the people are dead.
Who would it have been then?
But so it makes sense to me, and so when Darwin Cooke was adapting this to a visual form, he did kind of press Donald Westlake again and again, like who do you see in your head when like there must be somebody that you had in mind. And then, of course, he came up with the issue that, it didn't, in a way, whoever he drew in that first book, he had to change the face because, spoiler alert, at the end of, or the beginning of the second Parker book, he has facial reconstructive surgery and no longer looks like whoever he looked like in the first book anyway. And so that he does do that across the 4 graphic novels. He does change the look of Parker at the beginning of the second book. He does a kind of a very shortened version of the Man with the Getaway Face, which is the second book, before leading into the outfit, right? And so, but anyway, Westlake did finally say, well, yeah, basically, what's the movie where Jack Palance plays a guy who has got the plague and is running around?
Crime in the Streets, is it?
Yeah. So he said, when writing the first book, that's who the massive hands, the veined, which they come back to again and again as a descriptor of just like the craggy kind of almost Frankenstein-y looking kind of brow.
Again,
Jack Palance was
maybe a young Jack. I can certainly see it just visually, but the thing is, because I know Jack Palance,
right?
That Jack Palance is way too theatrical to be Parker, right?
Yes, yeah.
So that doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I kind of get it, but
I just purely the look, right? If you're gonna make a photo book version, you're gonna make a 1950s,
right?
Yeah, but you're right. Maybe not for the acting chops. I don't know. We can come back to that. That's a question maybe when we do an entire episode just about the Parker on film. So
anyway, what about this fucking comic?
Coming back to the comic. So it sounds like from our conversation that maybe you're not as enthused about this as I am. But I will.
I mean, like I said, it probably doesn't help that I read them both close in time, so I wasn't necessarily engaging with the story because I just read it, so I was just kind of. So that's definitely a problem. I do like the artwork. Quite a bit. I like this kind of, I don't know what you'd refer to it as, but the slightly kind of scratchy, scribbly kind of.
Yes. It's very retro looking, and I think that's part of Darwin Cooke's his whole career as being. He starts out as an animator and a graphic designer, and that comes through really loud and clear. And there's a very kind of it looks. I think what excited me the first time I saw the first one was it looked like it could have been published the same year as the novel itself. There was something about it that looked so much of the time, right? Yeah. And you read this on Kindle or?
Yes, yeah.
There's what little details like this, like that the map of Fun Island,
that's
goes
nice.
out, there's just little touches like that.
Right.
Or then, did yours have the little piece of the 7th at the end?
Yes.
Yeah. Which again is quite.
I don't know. It just feels more of a. It feels to me it's something that works as like an artifact. Like, oh, that's that's neat,
Mhm.
as opposed to something like, I don't know. There's certain things where, like Slay, I don't really need SLAYGROUND in any other form. I think
Right.
it's the thing. So I was trying to think about, again, because it's something I see value in, but I'm not dissing it. But it's just, I have to be honest. It's, for some reason it doesn't get me worked up in the way that you clearly are. And I was trying to figure out why. And I was thinking back to way back when RoboCop was new. I think it was Marvel put out like
Yes.
a comics adaptation of RoboCop, right? Which I think I must have read before I saw the film.
Yep, me too.
And I really enjoyed that adaptation of RoboCop, and I seem to remember it being very well drawn and fairly faithful to the film. But then, as soon as I saw RoboCop and I had the copy of RoboCop, it became immediately redundant to me. I never went back to that comic because why would I read the comics version when I have film? So so for me, it just felt a little bit like I don't need this. It's not to say it's not any good. It's just I don't have a craving for this adaptation of this story or this. But obviously you feel different.
Yeah, it satisfies something. As I said, I think because they are such visual stories in a way, and this almost reads like, this feels to me, especially because this one is so much, there's so little, there's really not a lot of words on the page in here. I mean, okay, that I'm choosing bad examples, but like a lot, like big chunks of this are just kind of raw action.
Yes, it's true. And it's very well done. It's very well rendered in terms of you're never confused about what's happening.
No. And so I think it almost seems like it's a beautiful storyboard, for the movie that didn't get made. This is the storyboard for the SLAYGROUND that should have been made, but wasn't. And so they satisfy me on that level, and they satisfy me, as I said, they look so much a part and parcel of the world of Parker. When I imagined the world of Parker, this was kind of what I was imagining as I read the books. And if you look at the other books as well, like there's something about the way he's chosen to visualize the stuff that to me works really well. And I love the art. I think it's just, I would be happy to just take them as art books alone, I think. But as I said,
I'm wondering if it might just be a gulf of someone who, like, I'm much more of a passive observer of comics, where you seem to have a little bit more skin in the game in terms of, you're also, I think you can relate to something in a way that I can't. I might appreciate it, but you might.
This is the Parker graphic novel that if I had the time and the talent, that I would make. Right? It's like when you hear a song, sometimes you're like, oh God, that's the song that I would write if I could write a song, And so this is that for me. I think that I don't know that anyone could have done it as well as Darwin did it, and
it's probably as good as you're gonna get. Yeah.
Plan had been to do well. I mean, I'm sad he's dead because he seemed like a great and gifted artist anyway. But the plan was he had a plan to do 6 books altogether, and I think he had kind of very selectively chosen from the books, and he had decided on ones where certain characters would. So some of the characters in the score, for example, show up again in the last book, Butcher's Moon. He was going to do the last book, so he was going to kind of choose. It was like a mini compacted, very tight edited version of the whole arc. You may have noticed, or may not have noticed, that one of the couple of the little changes made to SLAYGROUND are there's 0 reference to Claire. Claire is a character that Parker's not. I don't think they ever get married, but he definitely shacks up with her at a certain point. And a lot of fans consider the books to get a little mushier around there, like they're just not quite as hard-boiled and quite as mean-spirited. And that may be the period of time that you just mentioned when you were saying as you were reading them, you also started to fall off. And then SLAYGROUND, a lot of people were like, oh, hang on, this is back to the Parker we remember, the relentless murder machine Parker who,
right.
And then that follows through the last two books.
So what else has Darwin Cooke done?
Well, I mean, as I said, he worked with Bruce Timm, who's best known as, and Paul Dini, who are best known as the guys who created the Batman, the animated series, back in the one that came off the back of Tim Burton's Batman movie. But
Mask of Phantasm, that stuff.
Yes, yeah. So there was a TV
Right.
series, and then there was a TV series, and I think a lot of people correctly think that was better than the Tim Burton Batman movies or anything else that was kind of going on at the time. Again, it had that very, very retro 1940s look. It was very much a nod back to.
Yes, I can see the connective tissue there. I have to admit, that makes sense.
So he worked for them, and then so I think he and a guy called Ed Brubaker, they were writing a comic, a Catwoman comic.
Criminal?
Well, yeah. So yes, there was Criminal, and then there was also a Catwoman book that Ed Brubaker was doing for DC, and so Darwin was the artist for that, and then he did a graphic novel actually where he pulled in a very Parkery, very Lee Marvin-y Parkery look type of character called Stark, and then as he was doing that, he was like, "Why am I doing this pastiche when I could be doing the thing that I've always wanted to do?" Which apparently he long had a torch for adapting some of Stark, and so he then went to Donald Westlake. Westlake apparently was quite standoffish about the whole thing for a while. And took a lot of and not necessarily because he was like, it's a bad idea to make graphic novels out of this. It was more like, I don't know if you're the guy for it. And apparently at the beginning, there was a lot of notes back like, nope, like it's too much, like tighten it up, make it less. Like that's kind of, he still has a very strong idea of, I think, like a minimum of movement, like Parker should be about like the absolute least amount of effort put in a way,
right.
And so, but anyway, apparently he was pretty pleased when he never saw Westlake himself passed away before the first graphic novel came out, but he was pleased with the direction it was taking apparently. But yes, anyway, Ed Brubaker makes me laugh just because my friend Ed Brisson always considered Brubaker some sort of weird doppelganger who was annoying to him because Brubaker started out doing autobiographical comics as Ed did, and then they both ended up doing crime comics, and they both ended up working for the major, DC and Marvel. But Ed Brubaker was always a few years before Ed in each of these things, and because of the Ed BR thing, I think Ed was like, "What the hell?" I'm sure they probably know each other at this point, but way back, I remember Ed being like, "Who the fuck is Ed Brubaker, and why is he doing everything I want to do just a little bit before I get to do it?"
Right.
Right. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I don't have much to say really.
Nope.
Yeah. So I think we'll
shut this thing down, and maybe next time we'll talk about comics. What are we doing?
You never know.
I remember. Yes, I think I remember where we're headed next. Okay.
All right.
So that was mostly talk about various movie adaptations and the books. Regardless, you know what? Here's the thing. If you, for some reason, have been floating through your life and have not discovered the joys of Richard Stark's Parker novels, and you are somebody who likes your crime without a lot of sentiment or any sentiment whatsoever, I strongly recommend you begin at the beginning, go back and get a copy of The Hunter. In some ways, it's weird because the Parker in that book is not quite the Parker of the books that will come afterwards, but it's still worth starting there.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to the outfit, if you don't love the outfit, then you're wrong. You've lived your life wrong. Go back to the beginning, start over, and try again.
And if you are wrong, and you also like morons from outer space, then yeah, maybe you want to watch SLAYGROUND. Who knows? Yes. I wash my hands of you at that point. So yeah.
Okay.
Okay. See you next time then. Bye.